So if you're looking to always clear your hips, like you see the top players in the world, but no matter how hard you try, how much you try to open them, you're pretty square on and you don't really get too much rotation going through the golf ball. And the reason why that is no fault of your own. It's because you've been told very incomplete information about how to always clear the hips in the downswing. So I'm going to do that exactly for you in this video. So the things you need in your golf swing, so from setup all the way through the swing and the correct feel. This is incredibly important to be able to get your hips clearing every time, like we can see with my students here. So you know this information absolutely results in real world results. So absolutely, let's get straight into it and tell you exactly how to rotate and clear the hips every single time. So number one here, this is so important, and it is setting up correctly. There's two big things I want to see people do to enable themselves to clear their hips. So number one, your left foot flare. This is so unbelievably common of people not doing this. So having that left foot flared out like so. Why you want to do that is because that opens up the rotational capability of your hip capsule. Makes it way easier to be able to turn through the shot. Because what we see most amateur golfers do, they stand with a dead square on foot. Normally the reasoning behind why a lot of amateur golfers do that is because it looks better. That's completely backwards. We do not care about how we look when we're swinging the golf club. We just want it to be functional. Let me show you something. I'm going to try and rotate as much as I can into my left hip with that foot, with the toes dead straight in front. So I'll just show you here. Just going to get to a setup position and then rotate into that hip as much as I can. Straight foot, here we go. So that's about as much as I can do before I kind of reach a brick wall. So this is what leads a lot of golfers to believe that they're not flexible enough to clear the hips, because it's generally what it feels like here. It feels like I haven't got more mobility to go. But okay, if I set up to the golf ball like this, left foot flared out, so where toes are pointing more out towards my left there, again, rotate as much as I can into that left hip. Now, this should be a huge eye-opener to every single golfer out there watching this. Now, let me rotate again as much as I can before my mobility stops me. Now, again, that is so incredibly different. Now, that's so much more rotation. That's all because my left hip capsule has opened up. Now, am I going to rotate to that extent in a golf swing? No. That's just a kind of test of how much I can rotate from there. Now, there might be people out there thinking, well, this is because he's hugely flexible. You know, that's the only way he can contort himself into that position. You couldn't be more wrong. I've got cerebral palsy, which is a disability that affects, for me, the left side of my body, makes it really tight and not overly strong. So that's where I can do that. You can too, no matter your age, athleticism, or your mobility or strength. You can do it because I can do it. So that's where make sure left foot is flared out. No trick to it, just boom, flare it out, it's absolutely fine. Okay, so secondly, old man posture. What on earth do I mean by that? So that is sent up to the golf ball with your armpits over the balls of your feet. So this is what we call aligning your balance point. So then my armpits are then over my knees, and then that is then over the balls of the feet there. So this really helps you to, as you turn and rotate, you're going to keep in your posture. So if I have my armpits over the balls of my feet and I rotate, my head's not going to be moving overly forward. And then as I turn, I can then rotate in the downswing without the weight going onto my toes. The weight can then go back into my heels, which we're going to talk about later on in this video. Because if I set up like most golfers do in their athletic posture, so pelvis back, little curvature of the lower spine, a little bit of extension, straight back, and then having armpits over the toes, like we say here in the UK, football, or you guys in the US, like soccer, like a goalkeeper waiting to receive a penalty, that kind of same position. Now, looks athletic, doesn't it? But then when I turn back from this position, I'm most likely going to be then moving my weight onto my toes, because of course the mass of my upper body is in front of my toes, so then that weight is going to be displaced there. And then as I start turning down, I'm not just going to stay into my toes. That's too unstable of a place to be able to turn. So what we will see people do, instead of clearing their hips, they'll go boom. They'll move their hips forward immediately. Imagine you're on a tightrope. So if you're on a tightrope there, and again, if you're going to go forward with your upper body, what's going to happen immediately to rebalance yourself? You're going to quickly go back. Same thing happens in the golf swing. What's that going to do? Not clear your hips. So that's why we need to be in old man posture. How do we get into old man posture? Simple. If you stand to the golf ball, have relatively straight knees, they can have a little bend to them, but stand dead upright like you're talking to someone in front of you. Grab your golf club, put it in front there, and then relax your mid and upper back until the club hits the ground. Boom. There we go. Now, if you're like me with long arms, you might need to take a shuffle back. But there, you're still in that same posture. You're not getting the club down towards the ground like that. It's awful. It feels awful as well. So again, there we go. Now we're armpits over the balls of the feet. Now we can turn, stay in posture, be enabled to turn the hips every time. So that is a must, those two. Absolute must if you want to turn going through with those hips and clear them. So, oakley dokley, number 2 here. So, this is what I call getting in position. So, there's a lot of things in the golf swing that you need to have to be able to facilitate good hip clearance. Now, the main key points which are non-negotiables that you need in your golf swing are these points here. So number 1, having the club face square coming back. We need it square. So square means square to the swing arc, square to your spine angle there, because then you don't need to do anything to manipulate the club face to be able to re-square it coming through the golf ball. Why spend time trying to square the face if it's already square? It just makes golf easier having it square earlier, because if, let's say, my club face was open, I'm not going to clear the hips because my rotation has to stall out to be able to flip the club face. If my club face is too shut, I need to early extend to stand the body up, to raise the hands up, to open the face. So that's where I wouldn't be able to clear the hips on either one of those. So for square club face, make sure, first and foremost, your grip's good. 2.5 knuckles on that left hand, and the right hand line between thumb and the meat of the hand. Point it towards your right armpit. Now, there are more things that can open the club face or close the club face from there, absolutely, but for the sake of the length of the video, absolutely, grip is what we're going to do. I have a video of why amateur golfers can't square the club face for impact. Absolutely, that was from a month or 2 ago, so have a look at that if you want to get more in depth on how to get the club face square. So that's square the club face, have to do it. It's going to enable you to be able to clear the hips. Secondly, hip depth. So many golfers do not know about this. So that's where I will see on a daily basis, online lessons on Skillist, I will see with my students, when they first send lessons in, saying they can't clear the hips, they think something's wrong with their mobility. And what you'll see, they'll turn up to the top and their hips will slightly move, especially with the right side, will slightly move towards the golf ball. To where you might think, okay, the hip has moved very slightly towards the golf ball. What's that going to do? It's only a slight movement. But whatever is in motion will stay in motion. If you get those hips moving forward, they are going to continue to move forward in that downswing. So if your hips move forward in the backswing, they'll move forward in the downswing. What's that going to mean? That means you're not going to clear the hips. If you do, you're going to move the right hip. If you're clearing with the right hips, which we're going to get into soon, awful, you're probably going to shank it. So that's where we need, if we want to always clear the hips, we want the right hip to go back. We need this right hip to get deeper. So as we're turning, right hip getting deeper. I made a video about this last week. Justin Rose talking about the importance, if you want to turn your hips properly, of this motion. So right hip going back, because then that will enable you to get the left hip going back, which is going to be what we're going to talk about in a minute for the correct feel. So you need the hips to move deeper. So right hip moving back in that backswing. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to clear the hips, and it's how to always clear it every time without trying. Right hip needs to move back. One other little piece there is making sure your arms aren't up here. We want the arms to be, especially with the left arm, roughly to be covering the view of your right shoulder when you're looking at it on the camera. So this gives you what we call enough arm depth. When we have depth of anything, that means more back. Less depth we have means more on top or more forward. So if we're up here, lack of depth, and we start to try to clear the hips, club's going to get out in front of us. So we're just generally not going to do that. Hips will shut off, your hand path is going to plummet to be able to get the club on path again. So that's where, if you can get your left arm around, which is created via good backswing rotation, which good backswing rotation is one of the big components of that, is getting the right hip moving back, really important. That's going to get the arms moving around enough. You need to coil up the spring to let it unload. But if we get the arms around us through good rotation, then when we turn in the downswing, clear the hips, club's going to fall on path. It's most likely going to shallow out for you as well on its own. So, such an important thing. So, square face, right hip going back, enough depth of the arms, which is created ultimately as well from the right hip going back from getting good turn in a backswing. So again, there's loads of things that can influence your ability to clear the hips and ultimately rotate in the downswing, more than what we talked about in this video. That's why there is a course that I made about the ultimate guide to rotating the downswing, and also my guide to fixing early extension, the early extension masterclass. That also really dives into this topic. There are more things, and it is all in there, gives you a coaching level of knowledge. There's no other course on the entire internet which goes as in depth with personalized plans to be able to help you from there. So link in the description if you want to work on that. So okay, number 3 now. What we're doing is having the correct feel to be able to clear your hip. So your swing's in a good place now. Now you need to feel it correctly. So what that feel is to always clear your hips is the left hip. Left hip goes back. That is what creates our hip clearance. So again, what does that technically mean? That means gaining more depth of the hips. It's moving more back, it's getting deeper, creating more left hip depth. Because if my left hip, like I'm demonstrating here, we're pushing my left hip back, I'm not technically trying to rotate it, I'm just moving it more back. And you can see it's giving me that hip clearance, it's giving me that rotation and that good sequencing. Brilliant, that's how to do it. We don't want to do it with the right side. This is what gives so many people such a harsh time when they're trying to clear their hips. And this is what ultimately is a little bit of bad advice I see every now and again online, people talking about trying to rotate the right side first. Now, right-handed golfer like myself, actually everything I do is right-handed. So that's where instinctively I would want to move the right side first, because I'm right-handed, it's natural. But that's what we need to fight against, because if the right side drives more forward first, that pushes everything out in front. The club then goes outside the ball line, we're in Shank City. No good. So that's where we need to keep this quiet, right side back again. Video I made last week about Justin Rose talking about this, where his right side is back and then he focuses on his left side going back from there, like he's got a wall behind him and his left side is coming back to meet the wall, which is where the right hip is, and then just continues to push the hip back. And he says not only does he work on that, most tour players work on that, which is why, again, this is the correct way to do it. So left hip goes back all the way, and I'm going to show you for number 4, how to do this with a good drill and a feel. Okay, so here we go. Getting the left hip to go back. As soon as we start the downswing, left hip goes back and you just keep pushing it back and back and back. That's the correct feel. Like someone's grabbing your left trouser pocket and boom, pulling it right back. So there we go. That is your correct feel to get the hips always clearing. So number 4. This is all about the training. So how do we train and how do we practice this? So it's all good knowing the theory, but how do we actually go and apply this? So, okay, what we can do is make sure we're doing drills that get us into the right spot. Now, if you need to correct anything, let's say in the swing before this to get you in the right environment, go and do that first. That's absolutely so important. But drills that we can do to get this left side going back. Now, first and foremost, really important one that I can't actually show you physically here, but I've got an old video which we'll put on the screen right here with a resistance band. So tied up to an upright and then really swiveling the hips, getting the left hip to move back as we're doing so. I did that religiously for literally 3 years straight. I did it. So that's where doing that, absolutely, it loosens all your sides there. So it gets you more flexible at the same time. And then you just rep out left side going back. I used to do that in between every 3 balls I hit, I would do 5 of those. So the old driving range I used to hit balls at, I would initially first tie it up to that, 3 to 5, just like we saw with me in that clip, and then go into the ball and hit 3 golf balls trying to replicate that feel, and then go back again once I've hit the 3rd one and do it again. Why I would do it in that structure? Because if I've hit more than 3 balls, I would lose the feel of that drill, and I did that for the entire practice session with every single club. So that's the first way we can do that. So the second drill we can do to clear this, again, a lot of you would have expected this out of this video, and absolutely right, the chair drill, brilliant, because what does the chair drill do? It trains your depth movement of your hips. So if we get a chair or your golf bag or a box, what have you, behind you, put it roughly about half a grip's distance behind you, you can focus on getting up to the top of your swing, getting the right hip to go back to hit it, brilliant, but getting that left hip to cover that space, hit the chair and just continue to push it, you will clear the hips. Because like we said, knowing the theory is so important, but the only way we're actually going to do this always clearing the hips is if we train it enough. So that's where, again, the same structure I talked about, 5 or so of those you could do in between shots. So 3 to 5, really pushing it back, and then have 3 balls, replicating that exact same thing. Awesome. So there I was really focusing on getting that left hip to go back and hit that. And keep pushing it once it makes contact with it. Do 3 balls and then go back to doing some practice swings. Back and then pushing it through. Look how slow I'm doing it. That's still super important to do it nice and slow. You can almost do this at home as well if you want to train that at home with a dining room chair or even the wall. Right hip going back to touch it, left hip going back. That's going to get you clearing. If you train that for a bunch of time, you're going to get it in there. Now, thirdly, you can do this drill. So that's where you just get a wedge, put it underneath your foot. So just underneath your heel, then place the shaft and angle it to where it's just behind your left calf there. And then what we do as we turn up, we then get down in transition and get the left calf to hit the shaft behind your leg. And do that as soon as you can. What does that do? That gets the left hip moving deeper and that clears it every time. So same structure again for how you would hit the golf balls in your practice. Again, these all do a really important thing, not only train you, like we said, to get it, really, really good one this, and you let that club go also after impact. If you let it go before, you're driving the hip too early. So that's why it's a really good one to do for it. So not only trains the move into your golf swing, they give you specific feels. Each one of these will give you a feel from the drill. Like I always say, drills create the feels. So then you can replicate that feel on the golf course whilst you're working on it. Now that's where a feel that I always quite liked for it, we even explained it in this video, like someone's grabbing your left trouser pocket, yanking it back. So they're not just yanking it back to where you're moving backwards like so. You're still getting your normal weight shift, again, getting your pressure, weight shifting onto the left side, still important. But at that same time, someone's yanking it back. So again, these drills are great for practice, but again, getting it onto the golf course is going to be a matter of time, how much you practice, but you can nudge it along the way by having a good feel swing thought wise on the course. So one swing thought I always like is nice rhythm, give yourself a chance, and then like someone's grabbing that left pocket and putting it back, and then you're going to be clearing hips always. So this is absolutely how to always clear the hips in the downswing. Again, you've got to train it, you've got to get your swing into the right place. Again, there is a description to a course which is really good to be able to get the full knowledge on how to do this even more in depth. If you want that, this video is absolutely will suffice very, very nicely. If you can absorb this, train it into your golf swing, then you'll absolutely always be clearing your hips. So if you like the video, of course, click that like button if you want more golf instruction, just like this. Hit the subscribe button, hit that bell button too to be notified every time I put out a video.